Namaskar, a warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Anita Anand and with me is Abhineet Shukla bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says Northeast India is now becoming gateway to country's development. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar speaks to his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov, discusses follow-up of annual summit and 2+2 meeting. India and Japan to celebrate 70th anniversary of establishment of diplomatic relations this year. United States, Russia, Britain, France and China agree to check further spread of nuclear arms and avoid nuclear war. World Braille Day is being observed today to spread awareness about importance of Braille language for blind and visually impaired people. And in cricket, India were 85 for 2 in their second innings against South Africa at stumps on day 2 of second test in Johannesburg. As India marches towards administering 150 crore vaccine doses against COVID-19, news about the new corona variant is a cause for concern. In this situation, we appeal to our listeners to get fully vaccinated at the earliest and help others get vaccinated. Please continue to follow these 3 simple steps to stay safe. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, and focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID-related information and guidance, contact the national helpline numbers 01123978046 and 1075. And now the news in detail. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says Northeast India is now becoming gateway to country's development. Mr. Modi inaugurated and laid foundation stone of various development projects in Tripura and Manipur on Tuesday. The Prime Minister inaugurated the new integrated terminal building of Maharaja Bir Bikram MBB Airport and launched key initiatives Mukhyamantri Tripura Gram Samriddhi Yojana and Project Mission 100 of Vidya Jyoti schools in Tripura. Addressing a rally in Agartala, he asserted that the state will become the country's gateway to the South Asian countries as Tripura has witnessed huge development works in roadways, railways, airways and even in waterways.
मैंने त्रिपुरा के लोगों को हीरा का आश्वासन दिया था. हीरा HIRA, H से हाईवे, I से इंटरनेट वे, R से रेलवेज और A से एयरवेज. आज हीरा मॉडल पर त्रिपुरा अपनी कनेक्टिविटी सुधार रहा है, अपनी कनेक्टिविटी बढ़ा रहा है.
Earlier in the day, during his visit to Manipur, the Prime Minister inaugurated 13 projects worth around 1,850 crore rupees and laid the foundation stone of 9 projects worth around 2,950 crore rupees in Imphal. These projects are related to diverse sectors such as road infrastructure, drinking water supply, health, urban development, housing, information technology, skill development, art and culture, among others. Addressing a public gathering at Imphal, the Prime Minister said that his government has resolved to act east for the Northeast. He said Northeast is now becoming the gateway to India's development.
हमने पूर्वोत्तर के लिए एक्ट ईस्ट का संकल्प लिया है. ईश्वर ने इस क्षेत्र को इतने प्राकृतिक संसाधन दिए हैं, इतना सामर्थ्य दिया है. यहाँ विकास की, टूरिज्म की इतनी संभावनाएं हैं. नॉर्थ ईस्ट की इन संभावनाओं पर अब काम हो रहा है. पूर्वोत्तर अब भारत के विकास का गेटवे बन रहा है.
India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar spoke to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov this evening. During their conversation, they discussed the follow-up of the annual summit and 2+2 meeting. In a tweet, Dr. Jaishankar said they exchanged New Year greetings and agreed to remain in regular touch. Earlier, the Indian External Affairs Minister spoke to his US counterpart Antony Blinken last night and held a broad-ranging conversation. During the telephonic conversation, they covered current bilateral issues, Indo-Pacific and pressing global matters. India and Japan will celebrate the 70th anniversary of establishment of diplomatic relations this year. The two countries established diplomatic relations on the 28th of April 1952. To mark this historic occasion, India and Japan have decided to have special logos. The Japanese side had launched its logo earlier this year. We have a desk report.
The Ministry of External Affairs had launched a logo design contest in September last year to design the Indian logo. Entries were invited from the public through the MyGov portal. A total of 1,131 entries were received. The screening committee assessed these entries based on the contest parameters and chose a logo as the first prize-winning entry. The logo depicts a peacock and a green pheasant, which are the national birds of India and Japan. The logo symbolizes the bond of friendship between the two countries. It has been created by Anup Devpurti, who studied Master of Computer Applications at Sardar Patel University, Gujarat. He has wide experience in e-learning, UI and website design. To mark the 70th anniversary, a number of events are planned to be held in India and Japan throughout the year. These include cultural activities, exhibitions and seminars covering diverse areas of India-Japan bilateral relations. Exchange between Japan and India is said to have begun in the 6th century when Buddhism was introduced to Japan. Indian culture, filtered through Buddhism, has had a great impact on Japanese culture, and this is the source of the Japanese people's sense of closeness to India. Nishit Kumar for World News, All India Radio.
India's Textiles Minister Piyush Goyal has said that the production-linked incentive scheme for textile sector will increase the global footprint of the country's products. He said this 10,683 crore rupees scheme will create over 7,50,000 direct jobs. The minister further said approval of 7 PM mega integrated textile region and apparel parks will attract investment, promote technology development and generate 3 lakh direct and indirect employment in every mega park. Interacting virtually with the leaders of textile industry on Tuesday, Mr. Goyal said textile industry must collectively put forth their efforts to achieve their targets on the occasion of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. He asked the industry leaders to work collectively for achieving the target of $100 billion exports in the textile sector. He said robust export numbers helping the country to realize the dream of local goes global and make in India for the world. He informed that textiles export increased by 45% during April to November last year and reached around $17 billion. He thanked the Prime Minister for the decision to defer the increase of GST slab from 5% to 12% for the textile sector. He said government is trying to get new markets for textiles through free trade agreements. He informed that in all the ongoing negotiations with major countries like UK, UAE, Canada, EU, Australia, there is a special focus on getting concessional duties for the textile products.
In today's edition of Hotspot, we have a discussion on India's record exports in December 2021. In conversation are A.K. Bhattacharya, economic analyst, and Shishir Sinha, economic analyst.
Mr. Bhattacharya, my first question to you that in the month of December, we are seeing the export growth not just in the value term, but also in the percentage term. That means it is not simply a base effect. So what we could derive from this value?
Well, it seems that India's exports momentum have actually picked up its own pace, which is showing a growth rate, which is not just in comparison with the December 2020, but if you look at the December 2019 figure also, you will see that the growth rate is quite handsome and quite healthy. I mean, if you look at the figure for December 2019, the figure is around $27 billion. And December 20, it more or less remained around the same level. But if you look at December 21, which is just last month, it has gone up to around $37 billion. So after staying stationary at $27 billion for 2 years, in the month of December 2019 and 2020, it has picked up pace to a level which probably indicates that India is on a journey to achieve a new record annual exports figure of $400 billion.
One of the key concerns now is the spread of Omicron, and not just in the domestic market, but globally too. So now, keeping that in mind, when we are thinking about a record export of $400 billion a year, how do you see that will be possible? Do you see that that is slightly ambitious one, or will be able to achieve that target?
Omicron will certainly have an impact on India's exports in the months of January and probably February also. But if you look at the year-end momentum, which is normally seen every year, in spite of the Omicron, you need to have average monthly exports value of around $33 billion in January, $33 billion in February, and $33 billion in March, which to my mind is achievable even after taking into account the impact of Omicron. Yes, Omicron will have an adverse impact in the sense that where we could have seen exports value of above $400 billion, we may just touch around $400 billion. But the larger point is that we as an exporting nation have crossed a major hurdle. For the last 10 years or so, our exports have been on an annual exports have been ranging between $300 billion and $330 billion. And in some years, it actually went down to even $290 billion. And if I'm talking about the last 10 years. Now, to have crossed that $330 billion last record, close to $400 billion, even after we take into account the Omicron impact, I would say it's a major achievement. Actually, the real challenge or the concern would be next year, how you sustain this growth momentum, how you maintain India's exports engine. Because remember that a healthy rate of exports and healthy exports growth rate create a lot of positive spin-off benefits for the economy in terms of the manufacturing sector growth, in terms of job creation, and in terms of the positive pressure it puts on the infrastructure sectors like ports and railways and the transportation apparatus. So I look at exports as a positive development, but as I said, the real challenge will be how to maintain and sustain this tempo. We have to keep in mind the fact that there is a lot of pressure on the Indian rupee to appreciate. That will be a factor. There is a lot of pressure on the Indian economy in terms of its ability to get connected with export hubs in different parts of the world. As you would know that exports as a game or as a strategy has changed its contours. It's no longer about exporting commodities or exporting manufactured goods to different countries, but it is actually taking advantage of those supply hubs, which right now are located in three major regions, one is the Southeast Asia, the other is the Western Europe, and the third is the Americas. We need to connect with those supply hubs to maintain the growth momentum that we have seen in this year. And that momentum can be maintained if we sign up quickly some of the free trade agreements or even the regional trading agreements that are available to us even now. Remember that the RCEP has begun from 1st January. We are still considered an observer and we have the option of joining it at any time. The key would be how to sustain and maintain this growth momentum in exports that we have seen in the current year.
One more concern is there, that is because of the spread of Omicron, we are seeing some kind of local lockdown. So do you think that the local lockdown, as you mentioned about the January and the February number, so at the same time, since the manufacturing activities will be affected because of the local lockdown, how do you see this kind of challenge? What should be the strategy to meet this kind of challenges if we need to keep the export momentum or the pace of export at a very high speed?
This will be a challenge for the export sector. But if you draw the lessons from the first wave and the second wave, what we have seen is that to counter the adverse impact of COVID-19, it is not always necessary to have a countrywide lockdown, but it is equally effective if we have a staggered region-wise curfews or lockdowns or imposing controls on economic activities. In the second wave of the COVID-19 in May, June 2021, we saw a staggered enforcement of lockdowns or controls on economic activities. And that did impact the pace of economic activity. But the overall impact, if you look at whether it is the GST collections or whether it is the GDP growth rate, you saw that the adverse impact on GDP as well as adverse impact on GST collections, which is the barometer for the pace of economic activity, was far less severe than what we saw in the first wave when there was a countrywide lockdown for almost about close to 3 months. So I don't see that even though you are going to see a major Omicron impact on various states, various regions in the country, but the response will be staggered and therefore you will see some impact, but it will not be as devastating an impact as we saw in the first wave in 2020, March, April, May, and almost going up to June. And the second positive factor that we need to keep in mind is that so far, while Omicron is spreading fast, it has been declared as a third wave, but the rate of hospitalization has been quite mild. In other words, that yes, there are many, many more cases that you will be recording and people will fall sick, but that sickness will be relatively mild and requiring fewer hospitalization compared to certainly the second wave. So therefore, even though there will be impact, but that impact will probably be manageable. This is the sense that one gets as of now.
Mr. Bhattacharya, another issue is about the increase in import. If we are seeing increase in exports, at the same time we are seeing import is also increasing at the same pace. So it's a more of a kind of gold import or the petroleum import, they are also increasing. How do you read this number? Because considering that trade deficit is also very, very critical in terms of the value of what we are going to have in the next 3 to 6 months.
If you look at the import data, what is very clear is that the imports are by and large led by petroleum products. And if you take out the petroleum products from the import bill of around $60 billion in the month of December, you will see that the non-oil or non-petroleum and oil and lubricant imports has been there, but it is not that alarming a pace. And in any case, non-petroleum imports also means that there is industrial demand which is fueling these imports, which means it's probably being used for various industries in the country, which will see positive economic spin-off outcomes in terms of higher manufacturing output or economic growth. So I am not too worried about imports growing at the current pace and the trade deficit widening, because fortunately the country has got foreign exchange reserves of more than $540 billion. It has gone up even a little further, and meeting that kind of a trade deficit is not going to be a challenge, particularly because our services exports are also doing very well. Services exports in the first 9 months, which is April to December, has been very healthy at around $157 billion, so which is also a positive sign. So trade deficit, yes, we need to manage it. It is dependent on petroleum goods, and it is non-petroleum products. It means there is more industrial activity, which is a positive sign. And 3, that this trade deficit can be managed with the kind of foreign exchange reserves that we have in the country at present.
Mr. Bhattacharya, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts. Welcome back to World News. United States, Russia, Britain, France and China have agreed that further spread of nuclear arms and a nuclear war should be avoided, according to a joint statement by the 5 nuclear powers published by the Kremlin. The countries consider it their primary responsibility to avoid war between the nuclear states and should reduce strategic risks, with an aim to work with all countries to create an atmosphere of security. Chinese Vice Foreign Minister Ma Chaoshu said the joint statement could help to increase mutual trust and replace competition among major powers with coordination and cooperation. Chaoshu added that China has a no first-use policy on nuclear weapons. France also released a statement underscoring that the 5 powers reiterated their determination for nuclear arms control and disarmament, and they would continue bilateral and multilateral approaches to nuclear arms control.
World Braille Day is being observed today, that is January the 4th, to spread awareness about the importance of Braille language as a means of communication for blind and visually impaired people. The day serves as a reminder to authorities and people in power to understand the importance of accessibility for people who are visually impaired. The United Nations General Assembly (UNGA) in November 2018 chose the date for World Braille Day via a proclamation in November 2018. The first World Braille Day was celebrated on January 4, 2019. Millions of blind people across the world obtain education, training and carry out other learning processes in the Braille language. Braille is a form of written language for blind people. In this language, characters are represented by raised dots patterns and that can be felt with the fingertips. World Braille Day also commemorates the birth anniversary of French educator Louis Braille, the man who invented the Braille language in the year 1809. Louis Braille's invention of the Braille language is still considered a gift to humanity, as it is the most widely used medium of reading for the blind people around the world. India's COVID-19 vaccination coverage has crossed 147 crore 62 lakh mark. The national COVID recovery rate is currently at 98.13%. In view of spike in COVID-19 cases, weekend curfew will be imposed in the national capital of India, New Delhi. The city government officials barring essential services will work from home, while private offices will work with 50% capacity. Delhi Metro and buses will again run at full capacity to avoid crowding outside metro stations and at the bus stops. However, people will not be allowed to travel without a mask.
Bangladesh is mulling to impose fresh restrictions on public gatherings, eating out, occupancy in the public transport services, among others, in view of the steadily rising cases of COVID-19 infection in the country. Health Minister Zahid Malik told media in Dhaka on Tuesday that the government plans to restrict social events like picnics, religious gatherings, awaz mahfils and prayers at mosques to restrict the spread of COVID-19 virus in the country. Shops and shopping malls will also be closed by 8 p.m. rather than 10. Earlier, the minister had said that nobody without a vaccination certificate will be allowed to dine in restaurants. The Chinese city of Yuzhou in the central province of Henan has locked down its 1.1 million residents on reports of new coronavirus cases as officials rush to contain even small outbreaks just over 4 weeks before the start of the Winter Olympics. After Xi'an port city of Ningbo in eastern China's Zhejiang has shut down parts of the city on Monday due to 23 COVID-19 cases in 2 days, mostly in a clothing factory. This has disrupted the industrial chains, raising concerns about supplies getting disturbed for renowned international fashion brands like Nike and Adidas. Ningbo became the second Chinese city to implement lockdown this winter, following Xi'an, which has seen a record high of 1,663 infections since early December. Meanwhile, a US-based consultancy Eurasia Group predicted that China's strict adherence to zero COVID policy will backfire in 2022, causing problems far beyond the country's borders. The group, in its list of top political risks for the year, also sees the growing influence of tech giants and the American midterm elections as key risk factors to watch, along with Russia, Turkey and the global transition from fossil fuels to renewables. With just 1 month until the opening of Beijing Winter Olympics, Beijing has been unable to finalize plans for spectators as the threat from the fast-spreading Omicron COVID-19 variant grows. Amid China's goal of zero COVID, China has maintained rigid restrictions aimed at keeping cases to zero, but infections have been spreading.
The Indian Space Research Organization ISRO is targeting the launch of first of the two planned uncrewed flights under the Gaganyaan mission before Independence Day this year. ISRO chairperson Dr. K. Sivan said the third lunar mission, Chandrayaan-3, will be launched by middle of the next year. In a letter encouraging the scientists at the organization, Dr. Sivan said launch of EOS-4 and EOS-6 on board PSLV and launch of EOS-02 on board maiden flight of SSLV are immediate tasks at hand this year. He said there is a directive to launch the first unmanned mission before the 75th anniversary of the country's independence, August 15th this year, and all the stakeholders are putting their best effort to meet the schedule. And now a report from the business world.
The BSE Sensex climbed 673 points or 1.14% to trade at 59,856. The NSE Nifty also surged 180 points or 1.02% to trade at 17,805. Majority of the Asian stocks gained. Japan's Nikkei surged 1.8% and Singapore's Straits Times closed 1.5% up. Hong Kong's Hang Seng added 0.1%. South Korea's Kospi ended flat, while China's Shanghai Composite Index fell 0.2%. European markets were also up in intraday trade. Oil prices rose as investors expected OPEC Plus producers meeting on output to stick with their planned increase for February. Based on indications, Omicron would have only a mild impact on demand. Brent crude was trading around $79.20 per barrel. Back home, gold prices gained 70 rupees at multi-commodity exchange for February contracts. The precious metal was trading at 47,790 rupees per 10 grams in intraday trade. Silver prices fell marginally by 40 rupees at 61,700 rupees per kilogram for March contracts when reports last came in. And in the forex market, the rupee weakened 30 paise against the US dollar. The domestic unit closed at 74 rupees and 56 paise against the US currency. Rajesh Lake for World News, All India Radio.
In the second cricket test, India were 85 for 2 in their second innings against South Africa at Wanderers Stadium in Johannesburg on day 2 when stumps were drawn on Tuesday. Cheteshwar Pujara on 35 and Ajinkya Rahane on 11 were at the crease.
And now let's take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Wall Street Journal writes, Omicron variant is expected to dent global economy in early 2022. The Guardian says UK government urged to rescind Tony Blair's knighthood. The Global and Mail writes, federal documents hint at sweeping economic impact from Bank of Canada digital loonie. Sputnik News reports Moscow views Africa as arena for cooperation, not confrontation, says the Russian Foreign Ministry. Tolo News reports Afghan media faces budget problems, restrictions. South China Morning Post said Japan boosts Coast Guard fleet to counter increasing Chinese patrols near disputed Dao Islands. Ceylon News writes Sri Lanka and India expand Trinco oil tank complex project. Financial Times says Apple becomes first $3 trillion company after boost from pandemic demand. Himalayan Times reports Rahal elected CBN MC chairman unanimously for another 5-year term.
Myanmar is celebrating its Independence Day today. On this day in 1948, the nation became an independent republic under the terms of the Burma Independence Act 1947. The new country was named the Union of Burma with Sao Shwe Thaik as its first president and U Nu as its first prime minister. In 1886, Myanmar, then called Burma, came under British control with Rangoon, the capital now called Yangon, being an important port situated between India and Singapore.
A quick look at the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says Northeast India is now becoming gateway to country's development. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar speaks to his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov, discusses follow-up of annual summit and 2+2 meeting. India and Japan to celebrate 70th anniversary of establishment of diplomatic relations this year. United States, Russia, Britain, France and China agree to check further spread of nuclear arms and avoid nuclear war. World Braille Day is being observed today to spread awareness about importance of Braille language for blind and visually impaired people. And in cricket, India were 85 for 2 in their second innings against South Africa at stumps on day 2 of second test in Johannesburg. And now to end, let's listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan Vaishnav Jan by artists from Myanmar on their Independence Day. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.